Ladies and gentlemen, we are back. I am back across from the man himself, Alex Ostberg. We won't do any intro before this intro today. We'll just hop right into it because it's January 7th, and Alex and I are here to distill the 3 best lessons from this year and anything else that comes back from it. I am wearing my best Christmas sweater because we were supposed to do this. I'm actually not. I'm sure I have better sweaters. But I'm wearing a Christmas sweater because we were supposed to do this end of 2025. Life caught up to us. And here we are in the new year, breaking down insights that hopefully you guys can learn and apply directly into your life and make 2026 the best year of your life. So anyways, all that aside, Alex, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well. I'm glad this is turning into a bit of an annual tradition. I know we started this in 2025. And most of the time we've been talking on this podcast has been recapping a newsletter. We're actually going to deviate slightly and go off script, so to speak, and kind of return to the OG Dom and Alex format. So maybe we're going to bring the listeners what they want. Or if not, if you prefer newsletter recaps, we're going to do plenty of those too. So it's good to be back.
What's funny though is like the lessons, at least that you sent over, and even some of my lessons, the newsletter is really just your brain dumps. So in many ways, this isn't a newsletter recap, and it's not things that are directly from the newsletter, but also it's from the same brain and wisdom. So in many ways, they're crossovers, and you'll hate me for saying this if you listen to the podcast regularly and you're already subscribed. You'll be like, Dom, I was subscribed 6 months ago. Stop asking me to. But if you do enjoy the insights from today, there's much more from where it came from. And every single episode has a link below for you to subscribe and gain wisdom and all the understanding in the world from Alex himself. So without further ado, Alex, what's the biggest lesson in no specific order from 2025 for you?
Okay, I'm going to start with a statement that might be perceived as a little bit controversial. I think it may have been for you, and we were texting about this in advance. But my lesson from 2025 that really started to resonate with me is you have to throw out your long-term plans. Let me first just run through a little hypothetical scenario. Okay, let's say me and you were sitting talking together in January of 2020, 6 years ago today, right? And let's just say at the time we had asked ourselves to write down 100 scenarios of what the future could look like in January of 2026. I would venture to guess that if we wrote down in depth 100 scenarios, the exact one that we find ourselves in today would never have appeared on that list. The fact that we faced a global pandemic, I moved to both North Carolina and then I moved to Eugene, Oregon. I'm now coaching a group of professional runners. We started a newsletter together. Like all of these contingencies coming together in this exact way was completely unforeseen and unpredictable. And so sometimes I just need to marvel at the fact that, we have absolutely like no control over the future. We treat the future as like a fixed set of plans that we're basically just trying to like summon under our control, but it never works that way. And I think it doesn't work that way for 2 key reasons. The first is we're actually terrible at predicting our future selves. And the second is the world is very difficult to predict as a general statement. There's one thing I love going back to my first statement here about we're terrible at predicting our future selves, our wants and our desires. There's something called the end of history illusion, which is a concept in psychology, which basically says that we are walking around under the illusion that we have just finally become the person we were always meant to be. And this version of ourselves is going to be that way forever. It's going to remain stable. And if you were to ask people, hey, think back to who you were 5 years ago. Think back to your opinions, your risk tolerance, your priorities, and think about where you are today. Everybody will acknowledge that they're substantially different today than they were 5 years ago. But then you ask them to project that into the future, and everyone's just like, oh no, I don't think I'm going to change very much. So it's completely unrealistic. And then the second thing is that the world is really difficult to predict. History is defined by unprecedented events. I mean, if you just look back at the last century and you think about the things that defined our generation and the generation before us, it's things like Pearl Harbor, which triggered us going into World War II, right? Like the Great Depression, COVID-19, 9/11. These are unprecedented events which nobody saw coming at the time. And you have to just be, I think, humble enough to recognize that tail events drive everything in life. There's a few extreme outliers on the far end of the spectrum that carry far more weight than anything in the middle of the distribution, right? Like we have the tools and we are equipped to deal with the typical run-of-the-mill problems that you're going to face in life, but nobody is really prepared for the unexpected blow and the punch that's going to knock you out, right? I mean, even just look at like your career as an industry, right? When you were in middle school, nobody really was podcasting full time. And we're training an entire generation of people right now in college and in high school who are entering a job market that's going to look fundamentally different in 10 years than it is today. So that's just my initial reaction. I have some thoughts on how to actually grapple with that uncertainty and that anxiety. But my conclusion is you need to throw out the long-term plans.
The funniest example from this, not to get political, I honestly don't really watch the news anymore, so I don't really know if it was a good or bad thing, but as the like the Venezuelan president being captured by the US, moments like that where it's like who could have predicted that 2 weeks ago, except the Delta Force apparently. And how, yeah, just the most unpredictable things, large scale world events like you said, COVID, Pearl Harbor, as well as personal events in our lives, in injury, someone getting sick, getting rejected in your dream school, and all of your life getting upended. I love this point, but I'm also, when you texted, I found it interesting. And I guess my feedback off of that I would love you to respond to is, how do you grapple with these things being a reality with being maybe the benefits of being a dreamer and a long-term thinker? Because I myself, just speaking from my personal experience, have found a ton of value from visualizing future selves, future results, and then trying to live backwards from those things. So how would you kind of meet in the middle, or do you even think I should be thinking of these future things that I want or desire?
Great question. I think there's an idea that you need to invest in preparedness, but not prediction, right? So, like, there are certain attributes and skills that you can develop to meet the future where it's at and to know that you're going to be capable of handling those challenges that don't necessarily rely on you predicting the exact scenario that's going to unfold. I think that life is kind of defined a lot of times by our side quests and our detours, even though we don't like to admit that. Elton John once said that life happens while you're making other plans. And even if you think back on the most consequential things in your own life, you cannot plan to meet the people who are going to change your life. You can't plan to meet the person that you're going to fall in love with and marry, right? You and I got in touch via a cold email, right? That like none of us really ever saw coming. It was a strange convergence of serendipity. So I think the biggest thing is embrace the side quests, embrace the detours, invest in being prepared for the future without predicting it. And then the biggest thing, in my opinion, is don't waste time bargaining with reality. I think the people who are most successful in life are able to give you a cold, sober assessment of what the absolute brutal facts of the situation are without being committed to a future or a script that they were holding on to so tightly about the future. I think everybody walks around with a version of the future that they hope for and the one that's actually happening. And I think the longer that you cling to outdated expectations, the worse you're going to feel. I mean, they say that suffering equals pain times resistance, and everyone is going to face pain, but how much you resist it is really up to your control. I mean, think about this. Like, so many people have this script in their mind that, like, they're going to have a job lined up in like the industry that they studied in college right after they graduate. Does that happen for the average person? Absolutely not. Only like 25% of people end up working in the field that they studied in college. So many people think that they're going to like marry the first person that they date. Does that happen to most people? No, absolutely not. So I think that every ounce of energy that you spend resisting reality is energy that's not spent on improving your situation. So don't bargain or negotiate with reality. Accept it for what it is and be willing to move forward.
What are your thoughts on being a long-term thinker and dreamer, but acting in the day-to-day? So, for instance, having those dreams and goals, but not letting, because I see this with a lot of people. They talk about winning a state championship in high school, but the dopamine they get from stating their goals, you've taught me about this, almost prohibits them from taking meaningful action in the day-to-day. So, like for me, for instance, let's break down my day today. I would love at some point to be the top sports podcast on Spotify. What's going to move the needle there? It's going to be doing this podcast really well with you, replying to some core key emails, working on a few other tasks. That's all very day-to-day focus. So how do you, like, when you even think about your present life, do you have big dreams and goals, or is it almost all rooted in like the day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month? What's your kind of process look like in grappling with this principle?
Yeah, I mean, I do think we need to acknowledge that if you're operating in an industry where there are kind of predefined checkpoints that you need to hit. So for instance, if you want to be a doctor, which my twin brother is now a resident, right? He needs to have a 10-year life plan to hit certain checkpoints in college, after college, med school, residency, to then become an anesthesiologist, which he's going to do. Lawyer, same thing. There are predefined pathways in life where you need to be able to have some foresight and have kind of that long-term goal that's in the future. But then there are also industries like people in the knowledge economy, things like what you're doing. We can't predict how the future is going to shift and morph with like unexpected twists and turns. And so I think that you have to always be able to oscillate or go back and forth between the macro and the micro, right? When you're making plans, of course you want to think big, but when you're making progress, you have to think small. You have to be able to zoom in on what is the next actionable step that I can do today to move this thing forward and to move the needle. And I think you have to have both of those perspectives coexisting at the same time.
I saw this great reel on Instagram this past week that was like, my life vastly improved when I focused on how my life felt rather than like how it looked like. I really like that perspective, and it's something I'm trying to take with me into my day to day this year. Is like, on the outside, I could be, and this will get into one of my points later, I could be really, really successful, but like deep down, not enjoying life that much, or not like, I think one of the best two metrics for people that they can ask themselves is like, what are the first thoughts that happen when I wake up in my bed? Like, what am I thinking about? What's my attitude? What's my state? And then the second is like, what do you think about in the shower? And I think those two things have really interesting data points on like the direction you're going in life, and what meaningful action or change do you need to place or continue to have a fulfilling, happy life.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'll tee you up to your kind of first lesson 2025. And I'll just say in response to that, I think we optimize for the story we tell, not the life we actually live. And we forget that a great life is really boiled down to its true essence, just a string of good days. And how you spend your hours is how you spend your days, and how you spend your days is how you spend your life. That's an Annie Dillard quote. So if you can just optimize for, making your average Tuesday pretty good, like, I think you're destined to have a good life. That's just my perspective, but I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, my really good thoughts. My first kind of insight of the year, and I probably should have spent way more time preparing like you would. So guys, I'm gonna probably ramble a little bit, but I'll try to be concise, and all these thoughts are mostly from my head and less of from notes. But yeah, just if you've lost joy in the thing, nothing else really matters. I say this both as a personal lesson from 2025, as well as sitting and reflecting, Alex, on the guests that I've had and what makes them tick and what makes them successful. I think in the 600, maybe 700 plus episode history of the running effect, the most successful people that I've interviewed and talked to have this innate joy around their daily lives and around the daily pursuits that they themselves undertake. And there are specific guests, I won't name names, that you can tell that there's like a resistance, or like they're not doing the thing from a place of love and joy. And I could almost directly match up their upcoming results with kind of that disposition, or they'll get injured, or they'll just be burnt out. I think a guest I've had on who's really raw and honest and talks about this in a really, really good way is Elise Cranny, your former teammate. And I think she has been able to directly correlate her results in the sport to her joy and satisfaction from it. Because if we think about the sport of running, and we think about why did we get into it, for a lot of us, it was because we were really good at it at a young age. But for a lot of us, it was that mixed with the combination of like, we genuinely loved the pursuit. We loved how it felt. We loved the candy we would get after practice in middle school. We loved the simple act of the sport of running. And as we grow up, as we get older, as the stakes get higher, from making a state championship to, making Foot Locker, to getting an NIL deal, to getting a scholarship, to running professional, I think that the root cause of why we do the thing can actually take away from the joy of why we do the thing. And it's really, really hard to go as far as you possibly can go when you have to force it every single day, and when you're doing something from a place of obligation rather than from pure freedom and choice to do the thing. So that's my reflection on sort of the sport lens, and reflecting on my guests and what makes them tick and what makes them most successful. But I also experienced it with myself this year with all sorts of different aspects of the business, from the podcast to event marketing to just business expansion. You have to do things that you truly want to do and love to do. And anything you love to do, there are going to be periods and chapters where like you feel like you're falling out of love with it. And that's where I think it's really important to ground yourself, ask, why did I fall in love with this in the first place? And try to go back to some of those key principles and pillars, try to find that joy again. Because I can say with the podcast specifically, I myself, if I listen back to episodes, I could tell you at that point in time, was I truly finding love and joy in the thing? Or was it simply just a 2 p.m. obligation to maintain my cadence of every other day podcast episode releases? And I think the conversations that have the most impact are when I come at them from a place of like genuine joy, curiosity, and wanting to do the thing, which is the energy I had when I was 16 starting the podcast.
Right. It's a great point. I think sometimes we get so busy that we forget to actively design our life, and we get so obsessed with the climb and the ascent that we forget to ask whether we're climbing the right mountain. And I think ultimately what starts off as really a pure obsession and kind of passion project, a lot of times, especially when you start putting financial obligations on something, or you start putting more expectation on something, you can kind of suck the joy right out of it. And so kind of being able to embrace that beginner's mind and kind of the authenticity that you felt like when you were chasing it for the first time, rather than the status you're pursuing later, is really important. The last thing I'll say is that I feel like in life, we have a tendency to trade. This is something from Chris Williamson. We trade hidden metrics for observable metrics, right? Like, what are the things we really want? We want time. We want focus. We want good quality sleep. We want good relationships with the people around us. But those are happily traded, like in a heartbeat, for things like a raise or like a new job with double the commute, because you can measure that. You can measure how much money's in your bank, but you can't really measure like the amount of quality time you're getting to spend with your significant other, or the amount of sleep that you're getting. And so we cut off really the essentials in life for an observable metric that isn't really what we wanted in the first place. And I think a lot of times you get so busy that until you have some blank space and some empty space to reflect on it, you don't realize that you've potentially gone down the wrong path. So it's really, really important, I think, to kind of be intellectually honest and to constantly reflect on where you're going.
Yeah, and before I let you go to your second biggest lesson of 2025, the only thing I'd say is going back to something I just said, which is focusing more on how your life feels rather than how it looks. It's a scary and crippling reality, Alex, that I could do all the things I say I want to do, that by the world's measure would be considered success, and be less happy and fulfilled and miserable inside than someone who makes $40,000 a year, has a family of 3, and comes back home pure joy every single day. We don't like to admit that reality exists, but I can certainly say from the articles I've read, from the interviews I've listened to, and from my own personal experience, some of the most miserable people I know are people who from the outside have this ridiculous success, but on the inside are miserable. So my challenge to the listener is, focus on how your life feels rather than how it looks. Ideally, you can optimize both. Because if you're focusing on how you feel, hopefully you make the decisions that from the outside influence how you feel. But I think that core key principle, what are you thinking about when you wake up? What are you thinking about when you go to bed? Are you dreading the next morning? Are you dreading your Tuesday, as you kind of mentioned? And if you are, what are the simple things that bring you joy and pleasure? And root yourself in those things and act from that place. So
one more thing, and then I promise I'll move immediately to my next point. If anyone listening to this has not watched the Steve Jobs commencement speech from Stanford in, I believe, 2005, it's one of the most cited and referenced commencement speeches of all time. And he finishes the talk by saying that when he was 17, he started asking himself a question in the mirror every morning, which is, if I'm about to go, if today were my last day on earth, would I go do what I'm about to do right now? And if he ever felt like the answer was no for too long, he knew he'd have to change. Deep down, he knew in his heart he'd have to change. So I can't do it justice. He says it way better than I just did, but I would definitely recommend that everybody listen to this. Go search for the Steve Jobs Stanford commencement speech in 2005.
And I'll link that in the show notes for people who want to watch it. And my fun fact is I was exactly 1 month old when he gave that speech. He gave
How about
June
that?
12th, 2005. I was born May 12th.
Incredible.
So,
I wish I could have been there. Yeah.
Anyways, your second point.
My second point is, in life, you have to learn to embrace voluntary struggle to prepare you for involuntary struggle. Let me tell a quick story. Over the holidays, I go home. I was home for about 2 weeks, and I've got a buddy in town who's a professional runner. His name is Eric Vanderels. He runs for the Boston Athletic Association. And every time I go home, I basically just to feel something, I try to jump in his workouts. And I really have no business doing that anymore. Like, I'm washed up. I'm more of a coach than I am an athlete right now. I'm in pretty good shape, but I have no business running workouts with professional men. And on December 26th, the day after Christmas, we're doing hill repeats, 50-second hill repeats. It's just really the worst kind of suffering, right? Like, you're holding your hand to the flame, getting to the top, hands on knees. And I just asked myself the question, like, why the hell am I doing this? Like, that thought crossed my mind more than once. And I reflected on that a little bit, and I thought, man, running has taught me so many valuable skills that I keep coming back to in life. And the ability to sit with discomfort, the ability to have a proper attention span when things get difficult is so unbelievably important that I will never try to give up that skill. I never want to stop flexing that muscle. I think that I have learned time and time again that growth always happens at the point of resistance. And you have to you are defined in life by who you are at your breaking point. And I don't wish struggles upon anybody listening to this, but I know that life is challenging and that a problem free existence will never come and that suffering is a fixed cost of life. Discomfort can never be avoided, it can only be deferred. And you have to learn how to face that. And I think a lot of times we think about developing our running skill set in this separate silo from like how we approach life, but it's the same mind that you bring to your interval workouts, that you bring to the challenges that you're going to face in life. I mean, if you think about it, everything in life that you want that is worth striving for probably lies on the other side of something that's very difficult, something that sucks, right? Like a healthy body lies on the other side of the discipline to exercise on a regular basis, to eat good food. A healthy relationship lies on the other side of really difficult conversations and ongoing commitment year after year after year. And so I just think that, you know, chosen hardship builds capacity for inevitable unchosen hardship that's going to come in life. And you have to learn how to embrace that voluntary struggle because you are going to be tested at some point in time and you want to be ready for that challenge. You don't become a strong person by feeling good all the time and just skipping through life. You become a strong person by getting really good at feeling bad and knowing how to sit with that. So that's my plug for being a distance runner. Don't be average, be above average. And lacing up your shoes every day to go out and put in some miles is one awesome way to prove that to yourself.
Trying to find this quote, but there was not enough runway to find it while you were talking there. But I've definitely shared it on the podcast before, which is, give me one sec. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah, it was basically something like your life is only as hard as your life is only as hard as you demand it to be. And basically, like when life doesn't test you, test yourself.
Right.
And kind of this idea of yeah, we're only as mentally strong as our life demands us to be. And the reality is, if I had to guess, if you're listening to this podcast, you probably live a decently comfortable life compared to the rest of the world. And our grandparents, the reason everyone was fit was because, 2 generations ago was because there was hard labor jobs and in very hard life circumstances, and people coming from ships from other countries to do these big risks to like make it in America. And, you go back generation after generation and it's just like what our forefathers went through. Life demanded them to be really mentally tough, really resilient, not just physically, but mentally, spiritually, emotionally. And now we live in this like ultra pampered world, which I'm grateful for. But because of that, we need to go out there and put ourselves through 50-second hill repeats sometimes to show ourselves what we're made of and what we're capable of.
Yeah. I think most people instinctively view discomfort as a signal that they should stop and they should not continue to move forward. But the great people I know in life that have been really successful and that are happy with their circumstances, they've kind of developed this like perverse appreciation for learning how to continue onwards when they face that discomfort that other people instinctively avoid. So I just say lean into that. Being a distance runner already puts you above average, and do hard things. It's important.
Only other thing I'd say to that, my favorite analogy, it's funny because I was talking with someone about this last night, who was talking about just how hard growth is. And I said, well, do you know what happens when you go to the gym? And they were like, well, what do you mean? And I was like, okay, when you're doing curls, right? And so you're doing curls, you can literally physically see in the mirror your muscles like lengthening, stretching, what's happening. You tell me because you're Mr. Science, but at a micro level, there are like micro tears going on. You're breaking down your body. When you go to the gym, if Alex came and worked out with me, I would have him wrecked for an hour. His body would be like physiologically worse. And then it would have the adaptations over time through the rest to ultimately, key point, get stronger. But he had to do the breaking of the muscle for the muscle to get bigger. And that's how I view growth. And I think that's something that a lot of people miss about growth is if it's hard, then it's probably not good for me. When in reality, if it's hard for the right reason, it's actually a sign that you're growing in all the right reasons. And so I think that if you sit and you write goals down for this year, if they don't stretch you in some way, they're not going to grow you in the ways that you ultimately desire to be grown in.
Absolutely. You want to move to number 2 for you?
Yeah. My second point, don't know if you shared this quote with me, or I think, I don't know if Chris Williamson came up with it. Maybe I got it from him, but just the simple quote and sentiment: you've already achieved things, or you've already achieved goals you said would make you happy. And kind of this idea that I've gone back and forth with you on for many, many years, that we assume happiness is on the other side of the few goals we have now, without realizing that we're presently probably on the other side of goals that we said would make us happy. And it's just a point that I really want to take with me into 2026. Because Alex, I know you know this. A lot of people might not. Yeah, I'm decently honest on the podcast, but most of the time it's talking with guests, so I'm not talking about my personal experiences. Like, from a top to bottom level, my year last year was remarkably successful, but I also think I was more miserable than I've ever been, at least as an adult. And it begs the question, like, why would I be miserable if I achieved all the things I said would make me happy? And it goes to the root of my point one, which is, if you're not finding true joy and fulfillment in your day-to-day life, it doesn't matter how big your goals are that you're achieving, you're going to be miserable and empty inside. And I think a hard thing with the career of podcasting or social media, or just the digital age, is it's very easy to get fixated on things that we think will make us happy, when in reality, I can now state, having made more money than I ever thought I would make, driving a dream car, having over 100 pairs of shoes across closets in my house, of free shoes that from brands I would have died to have worked with 5 years ago. None of it makes me that happy. And it's way more about the pursuit. It's way more about the day to day. And I'm trying to learn this lesson at this age, in this stage of life, because as Chris Williamson says, he goes, generally the things you needed to be told on December 31st last year are the very things you need to be told today. I think this is something that I accepted last year, but I didn't practically live out. And so what I would say to people listening, because I know every single person listening has goals and dreams for 2026, whether written down or just thought about, I can guarantee you those things will not make you happy. What's going to make you happy is your day-to-day, how you live your days. Sure, you might get short bursts of happiness. Sure, those things might be meaningful and fulfilling. I'm very pro goal, but I'm not pro drawing your source of satisfaction in life from the goals that you set. And I think I've fallen too often into the trap of chasing, getting to the thing, not taking a moment to enjoy it, chasing, and just repeating that cycle. And I see that in our sport a ton, from the high school to professional level, where it's, can I win a state championship? Can I make Foot Locker? Okay, I've done those things. Now can I get recruited? Okay, now can I go to, Stanford or Notre Dame or UNC? Okay, now I've done that. Now I got to make varsity. Okay, now that I made varsity, I need to be the top dog. Okay, now that I've done that, I need to be All-American. Okay, now, and it's just like this never-ending cycle. And it's like, Jakob Ingebrigtsen has goals right now. That guy's not happy. I guarantee you that guy's not that happy. So all this rant being said, you got to find ways to enjoy the journey, to enjoy the process, because satisfaction never comes from goals. And as I said at the beginning, you've already achieved goals you said would make you happy. So who are you to think that you'll be happy on the other side of your present goals?
Yeah. I mean, if past big wins didn't create permanent happiness, that's pretty strong evidence that future big wins won't either. And I think there's this fundamental delusion in life that there's something out there that will make you happy and fulfilled forever, but it never really will. And the thing that's crazy is we live with a permanent, I would say, affliction or illness, which is something called deferred happiness syndrome, right? Which is saying that once I achieve this or get to that goalpost, then everything's gonna work itself out, and I'll be blissfully happy forever. And I think we put our lives on hold in service of some future goal, and we forget to appreciate the moment. And the reality is that we're chasing these metrics, whether it be wealth or whether it be listens or likes or whatever industry you're in. And I guarantee you that in 20 years, you'd be like, screw all the metrics that I accomplished. Like, I just want to be back in my 20-year-old body, like with the runway that I had available to me. And I would relive that in a heartbeat, right? Like, these are the golden years. And to quote Andy Bernard of The Office, he said that I wish there was a way to know that you were in the good old days before you've left them. And I believe there was an Alex Hormozy quote who said something along the lines of, I know for a fact that of all the wealth that I'll accumulate between now and 20 years time, in 20 years time, I would give everything to be right back in this place with this health and this body and all the time that's left ahead of me, which means that almost by definition, right now is more important than all of the wealth you're going to generate in the next 2 decades of your life. So to me, that's just something that stops me in my tracks. And I'm like, appreciate that you're in the golden years and lean into that and smell the roses, because gosh, even if you went to Warren Buffett and you were like, what do you want? Another $1 billion? Or do you want to be 30 years old again? You'd be like, I'd give up all my wealth in a heartbeat, to have that kind of runway again. So enjoy it. Life is short.
Yeah, 100%. My only comment off of that actually kind of feeds into your final and last lesson of 2025. Although I know you have many more lessons, but the 3 that we chose, we hate uncertainty, but I actually think we kind of love it. It's like what you'll remember this. What's the Chris Williamson like hot girl syndrome? He's like, we want the hot girl because like you know what I'm talking about? He says,
is it the unteachable lesson one?
Yeah, probably.
Just because she's like, you don't actually like her, you just want her because she's higher, like hot and hard to get, or something.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
That.
Exactly. Yeah. We love writing our goals and not being certain that we can get them, and that's what makes them meaningful and fulfilling. And I guarantee you, someone like Buffett would go back to 30 because he would think that he could do certain things, but he wouldn't for sure know it. And that's where humans thrive. Is like, Alex, you love that, like you feel like you can control your athlete's success to an extent. But if someone handed you the job and said, okay, Charles Hicks is going to win, Boston or whatever marathon he chooses next, you'd be like, okay, well, that's kind of boring if I just know the result. I need some uncertainty to make me feel alive. And that's certainly how I feel. 20 years from now, I think I'll achieve all the things that I think I will. But it's the level that I can't say with certainty that I will that makes my days really enjoyable and exciting. But we do hate uncertainty, as you'll share.
You're uncovering a profound truth that I think psychologists and casinos and gambling engineers have figured out a long time ago, which is that we're always drawn to the near misses and the intermittent reinforcements in life. Like if you get every single win, it will cease to be exciting. But if you introduce a little bit of uncertainty into any kind of organism, it hooks them in almost indefinitely, right? Like that's why people are stuck lever pressing the whole time, because if they see a near miss, or they know that, hey, I feel like a win is close, but it's not guaranteed, you've just created a long-term customer. So it's absolutely true. Perfect. I will move to my last lesson just for the interest of time here. And really to succinctly summarize this one before telling a quick story, it's that it's amazing how much you can differentiate yourself through trust and reliability. I've told this story on the podcast before, probably 1.5 years ago now. Back in 2023, when I was still running semi-professionally in North Carolina, to make ends meet, I was also working as a medical scribe in the emergency department. So kind of tangential to what I'm doing now. But this was a job that was paying me minimal wage. So many of my colleagues at the time were just doing it to check a box to get to medical school, to put it on their resume. And they were just treating it as a transition and waiting for real life to start. For them, getting into medical school or like becoming an attending physician was the moment they were living for. And they were just like, I need to just put my head down and get through this with the minimal amount of effort possible just to check the box. And what I noticed is that I saw that as an opportunity to easily differentiate myself. I was around really smart and motivated people, but I was like, man, like their mediocrity is my opportunity to excel. And when I was working with these physicians, because I wanted to be the best medical scribe in that entire department, I'd say like 34 out of 35 of the doctors that I worked with were like, oh yeah, hey, you're above average. I enjoy working with you. But then one guy out of those 35 people was an attending physician named Kevin Bice. He very prominent in the field of geriatric emergency medicine. He's like, hey, I've noticed that like you're pretty special here. Like you're better than average. If you don't go to medical school, like I've got a job offer for you waiting. And I was like, wow, no way. I didn't expect that to come. I wasn't doing it for the credit, but I just recognized that, or I guess my rule of thumb in life is that, you should never wait for your next job to do your best work. Don't rush through the low tier work just to move up as fast as you can, because the habits that you're building now today are the ones that you're going to bring with you for the rest of your life. And I strongly believe that you're always cultivating quality or you're cultivating sloppiness. It has to be one or the other. So how that ties back to trust and reliability. I think it's just amazing how much long-term progress people can make if A, you don't care who gets the credit, B, you're willing to show up and do what you said you did, and C, people can trust you. Because if you do 100 high-quality acts without seeking credit, the 101st is going to come find you. The best opportunities in life always go to the people that are selected before the opportunity was made public. Once you prove yourself trustworthy to a network of people, you're not competing anymore. You're going to get called before it's even a competition. So this is, I guess, a little bit more career advice, but also applies to life. But, trust is so important. Reliability is so important. It always, being consistently trustworthy and reliable always beats being occasionally brilliant. And that is a fact that I will stand by.
And pick your brain a little more off of this. You taught me this great James Clear principle, which is you'll remember it. But basically, like, if you put out kindness into the world, kindness will return to you. Kind of this idea that like what you put out, you'll get in return. And I thought of that off of that story you shared, where it's like, you never know who's watching, and you never know, even if it doesn't seem like people are paying attention or noticing. I firmly believe it's a great optimistic outlook in life, that if you put good things out into the world, even if it seems like no one's acknowledging it or noticing it, eventually someone will come around and not just acknowledge it, but reward you for it, because it says who you are as a person.
100%. I think reputation follows you everywhere you go. It typically enters the room before you even arrive, and it lingers after you leave. So that's point one. Point two is that all of human relationships are built on like mirrored reciprocity. I actually wrote about this in my New Year's Day newsletter, which is that a good rule of thumb in life is to always go positive and go first. Because it's like we have this tit for tat mentality that's deeply ingrained in our evolutionary biology, where it's like, if I scratch your back, you'll scratch mine kind of thing. And if you, like, everything that you put out into the universe, whether you believe in karma or faith or whatever, it tends to be reflected back on you. And there are some people in this audience who are going to say, like, I'm going to be super kind to someone and get screwed over. And I'm like, yes. And that will only happen like 2% of the time. So be willing to risk that 2% for the 98% return that you're going to get every single time that you're kind and generous, because it has unbelievable upside that you can't necessarily predict in the moment, but it will come back around at some point in time. That I know.
It's kind of funny. It relates to my final point. My only thing I'll say off of that is, dude, that news, I was like pretty off the map, as you know, over the holidays, which is like the one time of year I kind of disconnect. That newsletter is doing batshit crazy numbers.
I know, yeah.
I thought it would do well, but you just never know. And to this day, I don't fully understand the Substack algorithm, but we were blessed with the most popular newsletter to date. So we'll take it.
This is true.
We'll take it. Yeah, my final point here before you have to go coach some athletes. Final lesson of 2025, and I would say perhaps my biggest lesson, or at least like the most profound one, because I knew that you've already achieved things you said would make you happy a year ago. But it's kind of this concept that I think I shared for the first time on my episode with Mike Smith. It was a concept that I was chewing on for quite a bit of time, which is basically, I use it in a romantic example, but I think it can be extrapolated to running or quite frankly, anything. It's like you meet a girl and you're hopeful about that girl, and you put in actions to that girl in a committed way that you think that this relationship could go really far. And let's say you date for a year and you date her like she could be your future wife, because you know that's the type of person you are. And she ends up breaking up with you, or you end up breaking up with her because it's not a fit. And I think a lot of society would view that and say, oh, that was a waste of time. It was a failure. What I've kind of coined is that's, quote, the risk of love, which is you have to have goals and you have to act backwards from them. And you have to be okay with the inherent risk that it ultimately won't work out how you're ultimately hoping it will. How I relate it to running is every single runner has big dreams, big goals. You have to put in the action, you have to put in the work with the hopes of attaining those goals and those dreams. But if you get injured the night before the race, or sick the night before the race, and you can't race and you don't hit your goal at NCAA cross that you've been working tirelessly towards since July, so you've been working for 4 months towards this goal, not all of the work was wasted. And you might ask why. I think, at least in my opinion, the reason it's not wasted is because it says about the type of person you are, and the work transforms you. If you're in any good romantic relationship, it will expose your weaknesses. It will make you more selfless. It will make you better at communicating, better at handling conflict. With running, there are the plethora of scientific examples that you'll improve, but you'll also learn to improve adversity. You'll learn how to improve, on days where you don't have motivation, the endless amounts of things that we gain from the sport. The risk, in my opinion, is always worth it. And that's why to this day, as a 20-year-old who, if you would have asked me 5 years ago, I would have said, I still have dreams of making the Olympics one day, or minimally running Division I. The 65-mile weeks I put in my junior year of high school, that from the outside in, because I'm not a D1 runner, a lot of people could say, well, that was a total flunk and you wasted so much time. I would say the person I became as a result of that is everything. And I am who I am today because of the risk of love that I displayed in running during those formative years of my life. So biggest takeaway, honestly, lesson of the year is be okay risking things, and be okay with things not working out the way that you would have hoped. You'll be better off as a result, and it's who you become in the process, not the goal that transforms you.
I love it. Two thoughts to wrap up, kind of in summary here. I wrote down that the pain of grief is just as much a part of life as the joy of love. It's really the price we pay for love and the cost of commitment. And I think that's something where it's like this, discomfort or hardship is really the price of admission to a meaningful life. You shouldn't try to avoid it. And that's something we've actually said in multiple different ways throughout this podcast. And the amount that you can love in life, and this isn't just romantic, but how much you're able to kind of sink yourself and really like be incredibly committed to a task. The amount that you can love occurs in proportion to your willingness to get hurt. And if you're going to tiptoe around and like walk on eggshells and like not really be fully willing to put yourself out there, you're probably not going to have a very fulfilling experience with it. Right. And then the last thing I'll say is we sometimes forget that there's a cost of inaction, and the pain of inaction stings a lot longer than the pain of incorrect action. This is considered to be like the difference in making an error of commission or an error of omission, right? Like we remember the noise of bad choices, but we don't often notice the cost of silence, right? And making mistakes of commission where you did something and it went wrong, that will teach you a lesson in days because there's a great feedback loop. But if you make a mistake of omission, of doing nothing, that teaches you lessons in decades because you never actually are going to be able to close that loop and figure out what that lesson was. And if you ever do, it's probably too late to apply it. So I'd say like, be willing to make the mistake of commission, be willing to make the mistake and to deal with a little bit of the pain of regret rather than to not know what could have been, because that's ultimately a way more painful existence.
There's an amazing line my dad taught me from a theologian, Dietrich Bonhoeffer. What a name, by the way, right there. He states, silence in the face of evil is itself evil. God will not hold us guiltless. Not to speak is to speak, and not to act is to act. And I believe, I could be wrong, he was referencing Nazi Germany. And he was saying that it got to that place, not even because of people's actions, but because of people's inactions. So not to end on a very deep and philosophical note, but I think absolutely excellent point. Alex, absolutely action, wisdom packed 43 minutes. Appreciate it as always. I will catch you next time we break down the newsletter. Appreciate everyone who's listened. Hope you guys had a great 2025 and hope these lessons will help to transform your 2026. And go subscribe to the newsletter for more of this type of content and thoughts, specifically from Alex in the future. Amazing. No words?
They said it couldn't be done, but we got it done in 45 minutes.
There we go.